Well, hi everyone. I've got a lot of new information that I don't think anybody else in the public domain has at this time. So I want to go over what's going on with the Eastbound Washington Bridge in Rhode Island. As you know, I've done numerous videos about the Westbound Bridge saga going back to its emergency closure back in December of 2023. So I'm not going to address that, but it always made me wonder, they got caught off guard, Rhode Island DOT that is, by the poor condition of that westbound bridge, so they had to shut it down in an emergency, and now of course they're tearing it out and going to replace it. But it always made me wonder, what about other bridges in the state of Rhode Island? Are they actually aware of the true condition of these bridges? What about the eastbound bridge? Because the eastbound bridge is now carrying 6 lanes of traffic, double the amount of traffic that it was supposed to be carrying. So I'm going to go through my sources of information. I'm going to share plenty of screenshots. In a nutshell, I'm going to tell you what the condition is of the eastbound bridge, what the concerns are, and what I think needs to happen to, I started to say, improve the transparency with Rhode Island DOT or from Rhode Island DOT. I don't think they're transparent at all. And saying they're not being transparent is giving them the benefit of the doubt. Quite frankly, I think a number of their statements, particularly those made by Rhode Island DOT Director Peter Alviti, have been outright misleading. But let's just go through it here. And what got me thinking about the eastbound bridge even more was this publication last Friday by Ed Fitzpatrick with the Boston Globe. He cited internal sources for emails, photos, and other information for the poor condition of a joint at the end of the Washington Bridge eastbound span. And here's a photo of this. Now keep in mind, the information that I've compiled indicates that this eastbound bridge was rebuilt in 2008. The original bridge was constructed in around 1930, and it was completely redone in 2008. So you see photos like this for a bridge that was only 16 years old. This is a shocking amount of deterioration at this joint. So the other thing that happened, the end of last week, Rhode Island DOT actually complied with my request for public information about the condition of the eastbound bridge. And I got a number of inspection reports, photos, and other documents, and I'm going to hit the highlights for you here today, but I'm just going to tell you the bridge isn't in that good of condition. It's rated as fair condition. So again, I'll go through the details. Now this is one of 2 requests that I made recently. Please provide results of the Bridge Monitoring System Structural Health System for Bridge 200, which is the Eastbound Washington Bridge, from the time of installation in 2024 to date. And their answer was they couldn't send me any information as the Structural Health Monitoring System is still being installed. For my second request, I said, please provide the full bridge inspection reports for Bridge 200 Eastbound Washington Bridge that have been performed since 2014. And here's a listing of the documents that I got back. So I've got underwater inspection reports, 2021, 2024, bridge inspection reports, bridge inspection photos. So again, I'm going to go through the highlights from these documents. And then there's also information that they've posted publicly, which is a small subset of the information that I have. And if you want to check out Rhode Island DOT's website, I've got a link in the description. I don't know why they don't post all these other documents. But these are the documents that they have posted. 2023 and 2024 inspection reports, which again show the bridge to be in fair condition, rating condition. And this is a summary from the most recent April 2024 report. And again, you see the word fair here for the overall bridge condition. And here's an excerpt from that inspection report. The superstructure consists of 10 weathering steel plate girders, continuous over all piers except piers 4 and 9. So they talk about these girders having uneven bottom flanges up to 1/8 of an inch out of plane, with some locations measuring up to 3/4 of an inch out of plane actually. And then their fascia girders have scattered, misdrilled, unused holes near the piers adjacent to the scupper downspouts. And then girders A and J in spans 4 and 5 and girders A, B, and C in span 11 do not have the positive camber shown by adjacent girders and some girders in other spans. So camber, think of it as a gentle bending or arch, say of a bridge deck, or it could be a structural element of a bridge. But if you think back to that story where there were a bunch of runners on the Golden Gate Bridge and the camber flattened out, which was quite alarming. So it's a way of safely transferring the load and having some redundancy in the load resistance for the bridge. So when you're missing positive camber, it can be problematic from a loading standpoint. And here's the 2021 report. Again, fair condition. In 2019, again, fair condition. So what does fair condition mean for the bridge ratings criteria? It's sort of in the middle of the pack. Fair condition, all primary structural elements are sound, but may have minor corrosion, cracking, or chipping, may include minor erosion on bridge piers. So that's the overall rating. So here's a layout of the eastbound bridge, Bridge 200. There's a pedestrian bridge on the south side, then you have the eastbound bridge, and then north of that you have the westbound bridge. And this is an excerpt out of one of these reports, and you can see it appears, and I haven't been able to find a lot of detailed information about what was done to replace the eastbound bridge in 2008. But it looks to me as if the pier, the existing pier, and undoubtedly the foundations for the original bridge were reused. You see this pedestrian bridge off to the right. You see this old masonry pier. I mean, that does not look like 2008 vintage to me. And then you have a column on the end of the new pier that looks to be supported by a drilled shaft with a steel outer casing. So it looks to me like they reused the pier, and because the width of the bridge was greater, they had to put in these piers off to the side, these drilled shafts, I should say. Some people use the term pier and drill shaft synonymously. I use the word drill shaft so as not to confuse it with the overall bridge pier. You could have several drilled shafts supporting one bridge pier. And an interesting thing, in the Federal Highway Administration's National Bridge Inventory, they indicate, this was from 2021, that the bridge was built in 1930, which I don't know the criteria for listing the age of the bridge in the National Bridge Inventory, but presumably because it's reusing the existing piers and perhaps the existing foundations, that sets the date of the bridge. I don't know, but I just think that's kind of interesting. Now let's look at the bridge inventory from Federal Highways for the state of Rhode Island. So we're going to be interested in the first three columns, which is the total number of bridges, the number of bridges that are rated good, third column's the number of bridges that are rated fair condition, and then the fourth column are the bridges that are rated in poor condition. So for Rhode Island, 783 total bridges, 179 are in good condition, 485 are in fair condition, and 119 are in poor condition. Now let's look at some of these photos. They're rather surprising for a bridge that's only 16 years old. So there's a cracked bolt head on a structural steel element. There's a missing anchor bolt for the bearing pad underneath the girder. Here's the call out, cracked weld 7/8 of an inch long. This one backed off bolt, so the bolt head isn't in intimate contact with the girder there because it's not been tightened down enough, or there's been corrosion or some other issue. There's damage of steel flange. The report doesn't indicate what the likely cause of that damage was. Now here's a photo showing exposed portion of the deck with scattered hairline transverse cracks. That's not something you want to see in a 16-year-old bridge. So I think there's two basic categories for issues with this bridge. Things that appear to me to be an issue going back to the original construction, and then again, problems with maintenance of the bridge. As an example, you can see all the debris clogging the scupper. A scupper functions as your gutter would on your house, move water away from your structure. Another view, these are all 2024 photos of the deterioration of the pier cap, and they did underwater inspections too, showing cracking through these masonry units. Here's a crack in one of these piers, says full height crack. Now, again, here's some photos from 2015 that shows these problems have been in place for many, many years. Up to 5/8 of an inch gap between masonry plate and top face of concrete pedestal. So the bearing allows for movement of the bridge, but you still have to transfer the load to the pier cap and then in turn to the foundation. And so obviously you want nice, uniform, even contact of these bearing plates with your pier. And they don't have that in a number of cases. You see areas of concrete spalling underneath the bridge deck, another gap on the bearing plate, undersized bolt and loose. That's the same one we saw in the 2024 inspection. They noted it back in 2015. There's a bunch of missing bolts on the bottom flange of this girder. I couldn't see where they took a picture of this exact location in subsequent inspection reports to tell you whether those bolts are still missing or not. A lot of corrosion going on these structural steel members. Another bearing plate gap. 6 foot high, 0.005 inch wide crack on vertical face. So small cracks, but they go pretty much the full length of the pier cap. So this is concerning to me. I mean, again, they're doubling up on the traffic on this eastbound bridge, and the eastbound bridge is the only way to get across the Seekonk on I-195, and that's likely to remain the case for at least 4 years, the time it takes or will take for them to replace the westbound bridge. And right now they don't even have a contractor selected to do that design and construction. You know, the local news media has questioned whether Rhode Island DOT has assessed whether the eastbound bridge could take this additional traffic. Now, Rhode Island DOT Director Peter Alviti has indicated that he has engaged 2 or 3 outside engineering firms who have apparently indicated to him that the eastbound bridge is in sufficient condition to convey all 6 lanes of traffic. However, Rhode Island DOT, again, in their lack of transparency that's been going on since the closure of the westbound bridge in December, hasn't produced those reports. So it's not clear what evaluation was done. Presumably they would have looked at the existing bridge inspection reports as well as what the new loading would be, and done some type of engineering analysis to determine whether the eastbound bridge could not only handle that traffic, but if it can, for how long a period of time before additional degradation of the bridge would occur from all this cyclic loading of the passing traffic. This is a purchase order for the bridge weight and motion and structural health instrumentation monitoring system. I want to thank Rob Cody for sending me that information on that monitoring system. I'm sure a number of you in the region are very familiar with Rob. I've talked to him a number of times. I think he's a great guy. I really enjoy his attitude and professionalism to basically calling out issues on public infrastructure projects. And unfortunately, there's too many issues going on here with Rhode Island DOT, and they simply can't be ignored. Rob's background is an ASNT Level 2 in UT, PT, and MT. These are non-destructive test methods for steel. And he has over 30 years of inspection service experience on numerous projects, including power plants, high-rise construction, schools, and shipbuilding. So this was an interesting document. The scope of this monitoring system indicates the eastbound Washington bridge has become considerably more sensitive since the closing of the westbound bridge. Now, when I hear that, I think the bridge can't tolerate as much loading or cyclic traffic as before, but I think it's not clear to me. I think perhaps what they mean is that the eastbound bridge has become even more critical now that the westbound bridge is closed. But again, that's a little vague to me. Ensuring the structural integrity of the bridge, as well as identifying and removing overweight vehicles from the bridge, is integral to ensuring the safety of the traveling public. The systems will provide data which will allow us to analyze the bridge in ways previously unavailable and understood in real time what vehicles are actually crossing the bridge and the impacts they have. And this is just a layout of the instrumentation. They have strain gauges and accelerometers connected to a data acquisition system, and I would presume they're going to have a dashboard with real-time displays. I'm not sure about that detail, but you can get a really good idea of what's going on with the bridge and hopefully intervene if a problem starts to develop or shows some indication of developing. But surprisingly, this system isn't operational. As you saw from the response to my request for public information, they can't give me the results of the monitoring because they're still putting in the system. So again, they basically say their own justification for this monitoring system is how critical or how sensitive the eastbound bridge is, but yet they're going to go so far nearly a year and not have the system up and running. I've done a number of recent videos that incorporates InSAR data that's been supplied and analyzed by Value Space. So again, I really appreciate their support in these types of videos. And I've got data for the Washington Bridge. Originally, I was curious as to whether the westbound bridge would have shown issues that would coincide with those broken anchor rods that forced the shutdown of the bridge back in December. And surprisingly to me, they came up with areas of concern on not only that location of the westbound bridge, but on both sides of the eastbound bridge. So I'm not going to go into all the details of InSAR because I've covered that in other videos. Suffice it to say, there's a satellite, there's actually 2 satellites that orbit the Earth in a polar orbit, and a microwave signal is beamed to the ground and reflected back up to the sensor array. And because these flights occur every 12 days, and the wavelength of the microwave signal is 5.8 centimeters, they can get very fine resolution of movement. So this is being used in what's called asset management. Insurance companies use it to assess risks, but owners of infrastructure like bridges and pipelines can certainly use this technology as an additional stream of data that could potentially provide early warnings of a problem that was developing with, say, a bridge in this case. They can also use this technology to do things like measure ground uplift from, say, a magma intrusion. They've used this technology in Iceland, and they can get an idea when an eruption is about to occur. So it's the same technology. But again, let's look at these spots here. I'm going to focus in on the east side here, and we can see some deflections, that location of the bridge, and again here. And oddly, there's been a change in the trend. So those changes in the trends don't coincide with seasonal variations, which, you know, winter, summer, you have different ambient temperatures, which can cause shrinkage or expansion of structural elements. And this trend is contrary to that. It's not coincident with seasonal variation. So I wouldn't suggest using this data right now in an absolute sense to say, yes, they definitely have a problem, but it's definitely a red flag. And I think, you know, with this technology, you really need to incorporate what they call ground truth into the analysis. So based on this InSAR data, if I was Rhode Island DOT, I would get out there and look at these spots to see if there's a reason for these apparent indications of deflection. So what I'm going to leave you with today are questions that I think should be asked by local media and by local politicians here to force some accountability for Rhode Island DOT and how they're dealing with this Washington Bridge saga. So the first thing I would ask for is provide the engineering analysis for the eastbound bridge relative to increasing the number of lanes of traffic, basically the existing eastbound lanes plus the new westbound lanes that are going over the eastbound bridge. Post it to your website. Let's see firsthand. I mean, they said they had 2 or 3 firms look at it. Why did they have different firms look at it? Did they agree? Did they call out different concerns, if any? I think it just begs a lot of questions here. Another question I have is, in all these previous inspection reports that show missing anchor bolts or cracked masonry in the pier, what, if anything, has been done to affect repairs from the time of one inspection to the next? It looks to me like these areas of distress are only increasing in number and extent over time, and that they haven't done anything at all to address these problems. And the third question I have is there any potential for the need to close the eastbound bridge to do repairs or because of some serious issue, just as what had occurred for the westbound bridge? I mean, this situation is critical now. It was critical before, but it's really gotten worse. I mean, there's numerous car crashes I've seen reported as a result of all these extra cars being jammed into one side of the bridge, the eastbound bridge. So is there anything at all that could rear up and result in a sudden closure or a closure that extends for, you know, days or weeks in order to implement some type of necessary repair? I think that question needs to be answered. So please let me know your thoughts in the comment section. With that, I'd like to send a shout out to the channel members. I really appreciate your ongoing support, as well as those of you who have provided super thanks. That's another great way to support the channel. I'll continue to follow this story. Again, I hope local media is all over this. You know, I'm not local to Rhode Island, so I'm not really showing up for press conferences. I would love to ask Director Alviti questions like this directly. I've had a number of these questions throughout the recent months, actually going back nearly a year now. To that end, I've invited Director Alviti to be on a podcast that I can do to ask these questions. And of course, today's a holiday. I'm filming this on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2024. So hopefully they'll get back. I don't know if they'll be inclined to answer the questions given how critical I've been of of Rhode Island DOT's performance and his performance in particular relative to this issue. But I'm all about fairness and putting the question out there and let him answer it. So I'll keep you posted if anything like that materializes where I'd have Alvidi do a podcast video with me. So thanks very much, everyone.